Hey guys, and welcome to How to Paint Dim, the Spell Familiar from Blight of Gods. So today is a very special day for me. I'm going to be taking you through painting up this little character. She's from the Cult of the Undying in the Blight of Gods universe in Catan, where all these characters are set. And yeah, this will be the first set of full miniatures that I'll be releasing as STL files that you can download from the Blight of Gods website and 3D print and paint up. So yeah, it's pretty fun day for me. So as of this video, she's available. This one is for purchase, but there is also another one on there, Adar, which is another spell familiar, very similar style, which is actually for free. So if you go on the website, you can actually download that one for free as a tester and see if you like it, and then you can always pick up this one if you want to. And there's a range of other busts and so on there also. So yeah, I'll leave a link in the description for the website. You just click on that and you go to the store and you can download it and yeah, pick one up and paint along with this tutorial. So there was also a tutorial for Adar as well, but unfortunately during mid-recording of this particular tutorial, my computer crashed and I lost a lot of data, like basically a year's worth of work. So I've had to go back and redo everything. So it's a little bit sad, but you know, so from this tutorial, as you can see, there's already paint on this model. I have the footage for the flesh areas, the bone, but not the black. So what I'm going to do is leave a link in the description for the how to paint black cloth tutorial, which is on a Stormcast, and that is extremely basically the same way that extremely similar the way that I've painted this black cloth here. So it's essentially just building up from dark grays, moving up through the highlights, just progressively getting lighter, hitting those high points. It's pretty simple, but yeah, you can have a look at that. If I'm really good, I'll put it in the top right hand corner as well if you want to quickly go ahead and have a look at that. But where we'll be starting this tutorial off will be with the flesh and the bone, and then we'll proceed to finish it. And then at the end I'll do an overview and you get a better shot of this and the paint list and so on. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this. It's a great day. Yeah, and as I said, there is also the free one on the website as well if you want to download that before you go ahead and purchase this one. And there'll be a host of more of these coming out as the months go by, as I slowly work through them all. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so once we've highlighted the black and you're ready to start the flesh, as you're seeing me do, we're looking for an otherworldly color. You know, this is a familiar, it's outside of reality, it's a magical creature. So we're using that Grimnar purple to start as a base, and then blending up through my favorite color, Corpse Pale, and a little bit of white in there as well, to create our gradients of color as you're seeing me add. And so you're going to start with that Grimnar and build it up and create the base, and then slowly add in the different layers of color, moving up through to Corpse Pale, painting less and less of those muscle forms to go towards the raised areas to give you your highlights, and so that we're building in some nice interesting flesh across that surface. So you're going to see me pick out the very raised little sections. You'll see highlights on the edges of the bicep and the shoulder and so on, and around the back we have those interesting little folds of skin and depressions, and so you're just hitting those raised areas. And then finally you're going to glaze it with a blue glaze wash. That's water mixed in with the blue, just add a little bit of shadow in there. And then what you're seeing me now do is, once that's all finished, you're going to come across onto the bone. And the bone, we're using Ushabti, we're using a dark brown color from Vallejo, and we're building up again exactly the same way. You're going to see me start with that dark brown to give it a base, and then you're going to build in Ushabti slowly through a gradient, a little bit of that mixed in, and then through up into Ushabti and then into white. And you'll see me adding a kind of a streaky pattern here. We want to add that chitinous sort of value to the bone, so that it feels almost insect-like or something similar to this. So you're doing it in sort of this feathering motion as you're going to watch me do it, and just building that up, adding the highlights on the edges, and the very final highlights are just for the very raised tips on the edges of the bone plating and so on, so that we get something interesting across the surface. And that should then prep us for what will come next, which will be the glazing, which you're going to see me do. And with the glaze, it's got to be watered down, just like with the blue wash on the skin. You're going to want to add in more water, so we're using magenta, purple and blue, and then we're adding in lots of drops of water, maybe 2 or 3, to get that consistency, and then gradually washing it into shadowed areas, into the seams and the grooves to get your finish, and it should look really cool. And then it's on to the metal areas. So we have the brass and the gold, and so I'm using Runelor brass there for the skull on her face, and then gold for the little magical item that she's holding. And so you're going to begin by building that up, and so we want to also glaze and wash this as well, but you need to have some tones down before you do it, just like with the skin and the bone, the chitinous armor that she's got. And so you're going to build in, starting with the brass, build that up, and then you're going to add in silver to get your highlights on the edges of the skull. And that's the same for the gold as well. You're going to do the gold base and then build in some highlights on the edges, and then once you've got that down, then you're going to come in with the washes. So we're using brown wash first, sepia wash mixed with a bit of water, and then a black wash as well, Nuln Oil mixed with a little bit of water. And then once those are dry, you're going to come in with your glazing and use those magenta, purple and blue tones, just like you did on the bone areas, and you're going to glaze in a little bit of color to vary it up, put it into the shadowed areas around the back of the temple there, into the eye sockets and so on, to give a nice interesting look. And that also helps to unify the whole model. So you've got these magentas, blues and purples running across all the areas of the model and tying it together. And that's a very important feature of painting generally. You always want to see little bits of color that are unified across all of the surfaces. It really helps to tie everything together and make it a more satisfying thing to look at. And you'll notice that that'll happen as you do it. You'll see these colors all homogenize and come together. And so then we're moving on to the claws. Now the claws, I've decided to go for a more warm tone, so I'm mixing a Ushabti bone with black and building my grays up that way. And that's going to give us, I guess, a slightly different look for the claws, mainly black claws with this little bit of highlighting on the tips. And finally we're going to use Skeleton Horde contrast to mix with some glaze medium, contrast glaze medium, to give a sort of shiny claw finish. So it looks like it's like an insect mandible or something like that. That's the idea. So that you have something a little bit different. We've got some different materials going on now. We've got metallics, we've got this sort of shiny lacquered finish, and we've got matte finishes across the model. And that's going to really help to again add variety into your paint job. And then finally we'll move into the red gems and the little red areas on the masks, so at the top. So just using a nice deep red mixed with a little tiny bit of blue to make it a bit more magenta, and we'll just build that up from a dark base, moving up through an orange onto the raised areas, just like you've done with all of these steps. Just simple gradients moving up and getting a nice highlight on the top with a little spot of orange and maybe a little dot of white on the gem, just to make it shine and make it pop, and you should have something really cool. And now that the model's finished, we need to look at that base. So the sort of stonework areas on that base, I'm using sort of neutral greys. So we're building up through Necromancer Cloak and so on, up to a lighter grey. The base is going to be that Necromancer, so you see me paint that on. And then once you've got a nice, good, even coverage, you then move through and dry brush up successive layers of lighter tones of grey to get the highlights. And that gives you a good base to begin with. And we'll come back to this later and add in shadows. But to begin with, we're just building up those lights. And so once you've sort of got to that point, then we move on to the mud, and again we're going to build up in the same way. So I'm using Doombull brown mixed with a little bit of black to make it dark, painting out those muddied areas, and then using Bella brown mixed in to slowly work up the color up to sort of like a bit of a bone on the very edges of the mud, just lightly dry brushing across the top so that we get a little bit of variation. We're also again going to darken this down later. We're going to come in with our washes and give that a little bit of darkness. So don't worry if it's a bit bright to begin with, that's not a problem. So once all that's done, we're then going to do all of the other rocks. And so I've chosen again to do a warm rock here to contrast against the cool rock. So we're using Ushabti mixed with black, so we get a slightly warmer grey, and we're doing a base tone on that rock and building that up. And so exactly the same way as the neutral greys, except this time on the rocks. And so you're just building up through the greys up to white, just dry brushing it up, getting those tones in. There's a lot of surface texture there, so it should pick up all of that when you're dry brushing it, and you should end up with something that works. And again, it's going to look a little bright to begin with, but that's not a problem. We're going to come back in, as I said, and do that wash. And then finally, we come to that skull on the back. Now the skull is going to take a little bit more work, obviously. We're going to start with, again, just like the chitinous armor that she's got on, we're going to be using the Ushabti in that brown. So starting with the brown and building up your gradients through Ushabti up through white, and you just want to be a little bit more subtle, so you're going to build up more slowly, a few more layers of paint to hit those raised areas of the skull and give it a little bit of shape and form. So the light is on the top areas across the top of the skull and so on, and you're going to build that up, maybe even doing some feathering motions. You'll see me doing that, little lines and so on, to add some almost weathering to that skull and build it up. And so you should end up with something that has a lot of soft blends to it. That's really, I guess, what you're trying to go for there, is that nice softness to it. And again, we're going to come back in and do some washes over it. And then finally that little gold icon on the end, just using the same golds we've used and just picking that out, and we'll come back in and do some brown wash over that later. And then finally for the base, this is where we put the wash in. So we're just using the sepia wash and the biltong green mixed with water, and just liberally coat that around all the cracks and seams and grooves to give you the darkness and the shadows that you want to finalize that base and bring it together and bring it into a similar value range as the model. And there we have it, one spell familiar done. So dim, all finished. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed painting this one. It's a great day for my brand, Blight of Gods. If you want to purchase this one, you can just go to blightofgods.net and you can pick her up in the store page there, or you can click the link in the down there. But yeah, if you do and you do follow this tutorial, yeah, I'd love to see some photos of it. So if you're on Instagram, you can tag me there or hashtag me there or whatever you want to do, and I'll take a look. That'd be great. There is, as I said, also a free one on there. There's always free STLs on the site for you, so you can check that out too. The companion familiar to this one, Adar, he should be on there and free to download if you want to just try out my sculpts and see if you like them. But yeah, other than that, I'll leave an overview at the end with a nice picture of this and the paint list if you want to try these colors out, even if it's on another model. That's all good. But yeah, otherwise I hope you've enjoyed this. Please hit that like button, subscribe button, it really helps me out, and I'll catch you on the next one.